Welcome to The Switch, not another podcast. The Switch is a collaboration between Baseload Capital and DNB, aiming to accelerate the green transition. We want our podcast to be a central hub for knowledge exchange within the fields of renewables and green transition. Hosted by Kristina Hagström-Ilevska and produced by Emil and Jacob.
When you get an opportunity, you make sure to grab it. And so we did. The Switch, Not Another Podcast got an invitation to go to CERAWeek, the world's premier energy event, situated and based in Texas, Houston. We went there to discuss, talk, and listen to see what is happening on the energy agenda of the day. Collected there are the biggest names, companies, and institutions that can affect and make sure that we move into a renewable future, a green transition. We were there interviewing people, 5 different companies. We had Baker Hughes, Chevron, Greenfire Energy, Eavor, and we also had OGCI asking the questions that you have been posing to us. We are going to introduce you to this through a special episode of the CERAWeek, where we give you a medley about what hopes, fears, opportunities, and challenges are there in the industry right now, and how are we going to go about them. We hope that you will enjoy listening to companies from all over the world and their position on how to make sure to move to the greener transition. Enjoy.
Now it's time for some questions from the floor.
Do you feel that you have a brighter, do you have more hope for the future now after being at CERAWeek for 4 days?
I do have hope for the future based on being at CERAWeek. I think, this is a time in, geopolitically, where energy has become front and center again. And because of that, that opens the door for us to have really thoughtful conversations about what the future could look like and how we can be more resilient and cleaner and better for the future.
Thank you, Candice. Taylor, if I go back to you, what do you bring with you from CERAWeek?
I'm encouraged, right? I see this landscape of executives that run some of the largest companies in the world, the largest energy technology companies in the world, talking about what the future of energy looks like. And it's clean, it's renewable, and it's on par with how we need to manage climate change and emissions. So it's very, very encouraging seeing this come out and see what it's going to look like from 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the future for our children.
Do you see that was everything here that you expected to be?
It was my first time at CERAWeek, so I wouldn't say I had any sort of expectations for what would be here. Parrying what Candice was saying, there is a lot of excitement about geothermal energy at the event, but just not built into the organization of it. And I think that in future events, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of focus on how we could utilize geothermal to be an enabler of hydrogen generation, an enabler of emissions reduction and emissions management, and an enabler of clean baseload power online. So it's something that I think will come out of the woodwork between now and the next CERAWeek.
Were there any surprises this time around?
Well, in terms of surprises, obviously the conflict in Ukraine and Russia is bringing a lot of attention on the energy market. So I would say, again, the energy on the news is kind of bringing most of the attention.
What do you say?
For me, probably the shift, because we haven't had the live person in 2 years. 3 years ago, it was more conventional oil and gas. Now it's everything about decarbonization, and everybody is talking about it. And seems to be, it looks more like a tech company or a tech conference than a traditional oil conference. So.
Interesting. Is there anything you're missing on CERAWeek?
Good question. I think it's difficult to make it more in just a few days. So like that, no, I don't see anything missing.
That's good.
One thing is missing. It seems like there's a lot of talk about nature and biofuels and decarbonization and using land, but there's not a lot of agriculture or agribusiness presence yet.
We're welcoming that next year. Are you leaving CERAWeek with the hopes about our future, or are you leaving it with stress about the future?
Both. A lot of the hope I see the technology and people thinking how to solve the problems. That gives me a lot of hope. The worry about the future, we do see the problems. I think the geopolitical problems have become pretty evident that we have in the near term.
Thank you. What do you say?
Yeah, same. I think the energy security kind of question could take the lead on the energy transition. So I think it will be kind of the key point to monitor in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being a part of The Switch, not another podcast. And good luck for the rest of the week.
Now it's time for the CERAWeek highlights.
Well, what have I done this week for the climate? I'm here at CERAWeek in Houston.
Tell the audience what CERAWeek is.
CERAWeek is the largest oil and gas conference in the world. And it's been around for a number of years, maybe not so much since COVID, but this is a year that everyone's back and here in Houston on it. And it's really fascinating to go to some of the programs. And of course, we're meeting with a number of the biggest oil and gas companies for technical reasons and investment reasons as well. But we're also hearing that they are very dedicated to the switch, as you call it, and climate change. And one of the things I'm hearing a lot about at this conference, and they are dedicating themselves publicly to doing, which I don't think happened so much in the past, is being the solution for climate change. And I think they are ideally suited to be the solution. So there's a lot of discussion about carbon capture, utilization and storage, CCUS, and the various big oil and gas companies deciding to lead that effort. And they are the ones that should lead the effort because they have the technical ability, the financial capability to do it. So I'm more optimistic than ever about the switch because the oil and gas companies are going to make it happen.
It's kind of interesting what you're saying here. I mean, you're answering the question that your thing that you did for the planet this week was to go at CERAWeek. It's connected to oil and gas industry, and many people
would say the
are
opposite.
listening to you now, and they're thinking like, "Hey, oil and gas, they are the villains in this." What is your comment on that? What do you think?
Well, years ago, people would say, "You sure that their interest in green fire isn't just greenwashing?" But it's not. That's not true. Now it is true. Several years ago, the price of oil and gas would go up, and the oil and gas folks would. Not focus on geothermal, right? But now they're very dedicated to geothermal and these carbon capture, utilization, storage technologies. And guess what? They're going to make money now that there's a market with carbon capture and storage. They're going to make money on that. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. It's pretty amazing, actually, because you're walking around in this huge conference center, and I don't even see oil and gas. I only see.
They're not talking about it.
They're not talking about it. It's really interesting, actually.
Yes.
You would think that it's different, but every speech, everything that we've listened to is all about the transition.
Right. And they're investing not just in companies like Greenfire, but they're investing in the technology in major ways, or the carbon capture stuff, for example. And they have the ability and the technology to make that happen in a way that, new companies getting into the area, I would think, would not be very competitive. But the oil and gas world will rule that.
I think I'll take the first question. What have I done for the climate this week? So this week is actually CERAWeek in Houston, where we have a lot of leaders from the industry around the world meeting to discuss how do we foster the energy transition and supporting the pillars of energy, oil and gas and geothermal and wind and solar and hydrogen. And so a lot of what I've been doing at the week is communicating with people, advocating the need for geothermal to be a bigger player in the energy space and a bigger player to make all of these aspirations come true of green hydrogen, of carbon mitigation and management. So this week I've just done a lot of work to spread the message and to spread advocacy and awareness.
Now it's time for some questions from the floor.
So I'm standing here together with
Juan Secoto,
from
S&P Global.
and
Jean-Benoît Delaurent from S&P Global also.
great. I'm happy to have you here. I'm wondering what's been the best thing about CERAWeek this time?
The best, probably meeting people after 2 years, face to face, meeting people that we knew before, new people. That has been kind of a new thing to do now.
Great. What about you?
I would say getting different perspective. I mean, we everyone come from different background. I would say linked to the energy sector, but it's good to see everyone kind of thoughts on ideas for the future.
So I'm meeting up here with Candice.
Hello, Baker Hughes.
Well, I really want to hear now. How is the feeling been now? You've been to CERAWeek for 5 days, 4 days soon. What do you bring with you from CERAWeek this time?
This time around, there's two big things. First of all, the spirit of coming back together and collaboration and really getting together and planning for the future of energy. I think it's been a long couple of years with people being disparate and remote, and virtual CERAWeek was lovely, but there's nothing like having new energy technologies, startups, and the super majors all come together with the mission of designing the energy future both for today and tomorrow.
Now it's time for the CERAWeek highlights.
You do have like a reputation that is still hanging over you. I was talking to one of your employees the other day, and he was a former employee of Google. And when he was approached by Chevron, many of his friends said like, "Oh, are you going to that side? Or are you going over to the other side?" And I loved his explanation. He's like, that side can actually do something. It's quite interesting, but you still have a reputation being a bit of a villain in a sense. You're blamed for a lot of things. How do you handle something like this in leadership and also like this transition?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't challenging to know that there is that perception out there. I do think it is the minority that really, feel to use the term, villain, but certainly that view is out there. I accept that. And yet you hate to hear that when you work very hard and you see all of the wonderful things that we're doing as a company and the wonderful people that you work with. To hear that in the criticism, it does have an impact. And I wish that could go away, but it is the reality of any industry, really, any company, any large company.
Definitely.
But certainly in this sector in particular, there are folks like that out there. Look.
So in the end, it's a bit unfair. Do I understand you right?
Yeah, I think. It is, and I think we could do a better job always communicating. What we're doing, why we're doing it. I think there's a lot of education about the energy system and how it works and how it doesn't work. And you're certainly seeing that right now in the last couple of weeks with what's happening in Ukraine, which is absolutely terrible. And I hope it ends very soon, as everyone does. Folks are learning a lot about how the energy system works. Very practical matter here, and some of the importance of reliability of energy, affordability of energy, and clean, energy. All of those things are very important. So we could do more to educate and to communicate. And look, some folks will never convince, and that's okay. But I think there's a lot of folks that we could help in that regard. But that's one. The other one is we have to prove it. I can sit here and say we're serious, we're going to decarbonize the existing, we're going to grow new energy businesses that help with other sectors, that help with climate change more broadly. We're serious, we're spending significant money, but we have to prove it. So we have to execute, we have to build projects, we have to show that CCUS can work, and we're going to be a part of it, or can work on a much bigger scale than it does today.
Now it's time for some questions from the floor.
So I'm standing here together with
Ashley Little
from
ABB.
Let me ask you, what was the best CERAWeek moment for you?
Getting to collaborate and work with all the other great women in energy.
Wow, that really sounds amazing. Do you feel that all the expectations you had for CERAWeek came to life?
I do. It was great to have everyone back in person and everything going back to normal and being able to see everyone in person and shake each other's hands.
That's good. What's your biggest takeaway from this week?
Biggest takeaway, I think, is being able to see our executives come in person and be able to share our story and where we're going in our 2030 sustainability efforts.
That's ABB?
Yes.
Good. Do you leave CERAWeek with hopes or fears for the future?
Hopes.
I'm happy that you have hopes.
Yeah.
I'm standing here together with
Jeremy Poisa. I work for Schlumberger.
Welcome to The Switch, Not Another Podcast. How has your week been?
The week has been awesome because we have great panelists. It's a well-organized event, and I thought very productive.
What was the best this week?
I think the best was a session that we had on the changing world order with Angela Stent and the Chinese guy, I'm sorry, for Mr. Feng from the World Bank. I mean, he used to work at the World Bank. That brought a very inclusive view of the world that we are not used to here. And I think we should hear more of those kind of opinion in those settings instead of staying in our Western bubble.
Great, thank you. What, do you leave CERAWeek with hopes or fear?
I know, with hopes, of course, very optimist. All we saw this week are solutions, right?
I agree. Thank you very much.
Now it's time for the CERAWeek highlights.
So do you think like a product like the Everloop can actually be a part of like switching over that then?
Yes, it's helping the oil industry switch over. We're here at CERAWeek, and a whole bunch of different oil companies and oil service companies are now placing bets on various geothermal startups. That was not what it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we were sort of the poor country cousins of other renewables. You know, they say, oh, geothermal, here they come again. Yes, they're base load, but they don't scale. Well, now they haven't been proven they can scale at super competitive prices. That's what we're trying to do. But at least they're entertaining the possibility that, oh, maybe these guys have something. And some of the other geothermal entrepreneurs have a way of making it more.
But what changed them? What changed from them not being interested to becoming interested?
Because up to now, what we're doing was deemed to be impossible or not economic or whatever. And we're slowly changing people's minds through demonstrations, through, proving out the thermodynamic modeling, have all the national labs, double checking our work and everything else. And as well, the other thing that's happened in the last 10, 15 years is the oil industry's got a lot better at drilling holes rapidly. And doing it directionally and intersecting wells and doing all that, all the building blocks that we need to do to construct this subsurface radiator efficiently. And so to a certain extent, if we tried to do this 10, 15 years ago, it wouldn't have been possible. But because we're riding the coattails of the oil industry on the technological advances they've made, we can now do it now, or we're convincing people we can do it. But the other thing that's happened, you always need the technical capability to do something, but you also need a market to sell into. And the market didn't exist before because we didn't have wind and solar. So it's a little paradoxical, but we only exist because wind and solar have been successful with 2 cent or very cheap they've become very competitive. 2 cents a kilowatt hour is a reasonable target for wind or solar longer term. We will never...
To be that they can compete with oil then?
Because they can compete with oil, because they're cheap enough and scalable enough that they are taking an appreciable part of the electrical grid. And once they do that at their 2 cents a kilowatt hour, that actually creates a market for us at 6 cents a kilowatt hour. Now that sounds crazy, bullshit, right? How can someone selling 2 cents an hour enable a market for 6 cents an hour? It's because that 2 cent electricity is displacing gas and coal and nuclear and things that were solid baseload performers. So wind and solar has lowered the overall cost of the grid, of the electricity coming out of it, but the end consumer hasn't seen it because how do you replace all that baseload power they're displacing? You need a green alternative, that can go in there, that is scalable, that is reliable, that is baseload, that is dispatchable. That's us. And if we can do that for 6 cents an hour and blend that with some wind and solar, you can have a completely green grid. But there was no market for us before. Because when you're starting with a fully, let's say gas-powered or coal-powered grid, it makes no sense to put in geothermal right away. The cheapest, you pick the low-hanging fruit as you're going green, and the low-hanging fruit is wind and solar. But we're reaching the limit of that, and we need this baseload alternative.
Now it's time for some questions from the floor.
So, hi, welcome.
Hi,
Your name is?
Reza,
From?
our Incubator.
Nice to meet you. Tell me, how has your week been?
Very great. I mean, wonderful. Met a lot of interesting people, attended a lot of very providing and informative talks by experts, and made a lot of good connections.
What was the best thing you learned this week?
There's several of them, but it's all in line with the recent development in technologies around hydrogen and also carbon management, both. I mean, I can point out one, but there's several of them that I really left with a lot of new knowledge and new points.
Do you leave CERAWeek with more hopes or fear?
Absolutely hope.
Can you elaborate on that?
It's very interesting to see a lot of development in the carbon management and the transitioning of energy within the oil industry, in the oil capital of the world. So it's very interesting that frontier, that knowledge, that belief is already developed, and they're taking steps to actually make investment in those fields and reinvent themselves within the industry.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Hi, I'm standing here together with
Mackenzie Chambers
from
Sonova Energy International.
Have you had a good week?
Yes, I have.
What was the best with this week?
The best part was learning about renewables and solar energy outside of just my company and seeing a lot of younger faces here, actually.
What do you leave CERAWeek with hopes or fear for the future?
Definitely a lot of hope for the future, but there's a lot of work to be done.
Can you elaborate on that?
I think there's just a lot of work to be done in terms of, like my boss, John Berger, said, collaboration between solar, renewables, wind energy, and increasing technologies, and then working together with utilities to provide clean, resilient, and reliable energy for our consumers.
I agree with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Christina. Thank you.
Now it's time for the CERAWeek highlights.
So the first, there's a professional and there's a personal sunshine. So the professional one is that, hey, we just had our whole team here for a week, and we brought most of our portfolio companies with us. Some of the chief executives came and some of the business development people. And so the sunshine is out to the rest of my colleagues, my team in OGCI, who've done a fabulous job this week, particularly on the methane pledge that you just talked about there. But also many of the portfolio companies, CEOs who are bringing this amazing technology forward to help solve these problems that we've been talking about. So a big shout out to those guys. But actually, the most important bit of sunshine has to go to my wife, Louise, who is back at home with the kids, allowing me to be here in Houston, having this conversation and attending all of these very interesting meetings. So most of the sunshine goes back to Mrs. Harwood. I don't know whether, will she see it?
Yeah, she can see it. So you can see it.
And to the kids. Okay.
There is a very interesting African proverb saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And I think that this is a summary of the CERAWeek in all, where different type of energy solutions are collected under one roof. It's easy to say that the world is black and white, and to say who is a villain and who should do what. But honestly, listening to these fascinating people and conversations that has been throughout the CERAWeek, we need to understand that the world is gray. And in order to make sure that we do the switch fast enough, we need to have collaborations. Collaborations with intellectual property, collaboration with technology solutions, collaboration between people to make sure that we set a new demand on the market, that we make sure that we give all our people the opportunity to choose the right thing. And we can't do this alone. We really need to hold hands throughout this. And I think that that's what CERAWeek leaves us with, the hope that we can do this if we do it together. Remember that you are a part of the switch. So tune in, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to share this to someone else that you think should be a part of the energy revolution. Have a good week and see you soon again.